Well-read films are in Derby this afternoon to record the NUT demonstration against academies. Academies are in the news at the moment as Nicky Morgan, the Secretary of State for Education, a corporate lawyer by training, insists that all schools should become academies in England. Will this benefit the children or will it benefit someone else? Right, starts on there, does it? Right. Okay, it's certainly a really interesting and creative banner that certainly focuses on the money. Is the money the main focus of academy schools?
It is worrying how much the bosses of the chains are paid. It's an enormous amount, and it wasn't only till recently that Ofsted were actually allowed to look at the budgets of what the academy chains were doing with their money, and this is obviously what they are doing. The people at the top are paying themselves large amounts of money, and they're also actually holding millions of pounds in their bank accounts and not actually spending it on the schools. This is what recently the Ofsted chief has just found out, which to us as teachers, as part of an academy, to me is horrifying. You know, the money should be spent in the schools, actually on the education.
So would it be a reasonable analogy to describe an academy chain boss as an absentee landlord who's just sucking the money out of the system, or is that?
Well, it is taxpayers' money. You know, this is what's alarming, it is too big a wage to be paid for somebody taxpayers' money. And when you pay your taxes, you want to think that they're actually going for something good. I'm afraid that is not something where I want my taxes to go.
I'm Dick Banker. I'm a retired civil servant. I worked 42 years for the DWP. I worked in the public sector along with all the other teachers. The reason for me coming out on this protest is the fact there's been a steady move towards privatisation, and academies is a halfway house for it. Privatisation means whatever they can get away with in terms of job conditions, in terms of work pressures, and that you know your place just as much as the government are trying to get children know theirs, that you don't ask questions, you take your orders and you suffer basically and survive, and the government basically do not care.
Before 1870 there was no coordinated education system in this country. What there were anybody who wanted to, whether it was a faith group or whatever, could set up a school. They could teach what they wanted. They could pay their teachers or not what they wanted. The kids, it was a lottery whether you got a place or not. 1870 Education Act began to change all of that, and it introduced a nationwide system of schooling for all our children. The Tories are trying to take that away and reintroduce a free-for-all. We can't allow them to do it.
I was absolutely shocked last week when it was announced that we were all going to be forced to become academies. I wondered how on earth that was democracy when schools had no choice, and how we were being pushed towards something that actually is no proof that it actually improves standards. So what is it all about? It's not making it local, it's not empowering local people, it's taking our schools off us, giving them our taxes, just for a business to run our schools. This is wrong and we should stop it. And I'm really glad we're all here today to say that we're against it.
Because one thing's very, very clear. They do not support our education system that we have fought for, that our fathers and grandfathers have fought for. They do not support, and grandmothers, they do not support our health system in the way that they're attacking the junior doctors. And we have to wake up to the realities. What's happening to health is happening to our education, and it's what we feel dear about, not what this government feels dear about. So I'm sorry I've got to be here this afternoon, because I would much prefer to know that our education system was in the safe hands of teachers able to teach the curriculum and there is a whole range of support staff, members of my union, Unison, who are there to work alongside alongside teachers to provide that education. Not all.
Today, Disabled People Against the Cuts have been in action in Parliament to highlight the cuts and the effects that government policy is having on disabled people. How would the government policy of academisation affect disabled children?
Well, the honest answer is we don't know, because it's all a big experiment, so it's difficult to say for sure what will happen. But what they're effectively doing is removing local authorities who, for example, at the moment, the provision I work in, that's provided by the local authorities. So those young people who slip through the net and have ended up, for whatever reason, not in a mainstream school, they get picked up by the local authority who have an obligation to provide them with somewhere to educate them. Now, when the local authority doesn't exist anymore, I'm not clear who's going to take that role on and how that's going to be managed. And similarly, all the way that the local authority allocates resources to children with special needs who are in mainstream schools, that's a huge job. They do with scarce resources now, and I don't see where there's a provision, where there's a plan for how that's going to happen in the future.
Is there any truth in the possibility that some academies might be tempted to refuse places to disabled children or people with SEN?
I'm sure the official answer will be no, but of course, you know, somebody mentioned earlier about schools are already very data driven now, and I think, you know, when you put them in private hands, that's going to become more so. The figures are going to be so crucial. So if you've got an opportunity to maybe subtly word your policies in such a way that allows you to be a little bit more selective about who you take, you're not going to choose to take the children who are going to cost a lot, or the children who aren't going to make the required levels of progress in a given time. You'd be tempted not to take them, wouldn't you, if you could find a way not to? So that's my great fear.
Yeah. So really, this is an issue that disabled people, disabled children need to be aware of, and sort of come alongside with teachers to find out what's happening and support the campaign.
And I think their parents have often had years of battling to be, you know, for it to be recognised the difficulties that their children have, and to get support in place. And it's a long and often quite emotionally demanding process for parents. But nonetheless, I think they need to be here alongside us as well, because they're going to be really hit very hard by these changes. And so it seems to me that there isn't a plan for how they're going to be supported.
It seems like the danger is that, as with the Department of Work and Pensions and with the fight that the junior doctors have had with Jeremy Hunt, that this government is perfectly capable of imposing decisions, that Nicky Morgan may well impose this policy
They're
on schools.
imposing policies left, right and centre. I mean, this forced academies of all schools wasn't even in their manifesto. There's no democratic mandate for it, but they've just announced that they're doing it. And that it almost like, you know, it's not a consultation, it's an announcement.
Yeah, so it's like government by diktat rather than democratic process.
So the last thing I want to say is, today, here, this is great, all united together, but when you leave here, don't forget to book your place, your seats on the coaches leaving Derby on the 16th of April for that national demonstration for health, homes, jobs and education, because all our kids, all our grandkids and all future generations rely on us to act now. So let's not forget, let's act. At the moment, local authorities are ultimately responsible for our children being educated. If they disappear, which is the plan of the government, then who's going to make sure that our kids are not dropping out of school? There's going to be nobody. There's going to be nobody there. Do we really seriously think that somebody up in London, the Department for Education, is going to take notice of who hasn't been to school for a while in Derby?
made. I'm absolutely proud and delighted to stand shoulder to shoulder with our trade union comrades tonight against these proposals for forced academisation of schools. They will do nothing to improve the democratic accountability of those that are responsible for our schools. I believe that local authorities should be involved in local education, not faceless bureaucrats in Whitehall, who will ultimately be the ones that are responsible for our schools under this dogmatic proposal. It's the final piece in this government's ideologically driven puzzle to create privatisation in our schools. That's what I believe. And we have got to stand shoulder to shoulder with those people who care about free education, who care about the young people and children, not just in this city but in this country.
Okay, my name's Nicola. I'm currently on a long-term supply job at a school in Derby because I was made redundant from my previous job when not long after we became an academy. They've made 5 teachers redundant, 6 teaching assistants redundant and 2 learning mentors. So they got rid of a lot of staff. The teachers that they got rid of were all mostly over 50. As were some of the teaching assistants. It's as if they don't want anybody in the schools who's a bit older, a bit wiser, who might argue, who might challenge things. They want just young teachers in there that are going to work till 8 o'clock every single night and never question it, and then after a few years just quit. So they got rid of all these staff and then expect the school to get better exam results. Well, I don't see how that can possibly happen. In a lot of schools, if the teacher's off sick, it might be the teaching assistant that covers it, or it might be a cover supervisor. And a cover supervisor can be anybody who's aged 18 years old with minimal qualifications will be covering your child's class. And parents just do not realise that. Now, some schools don't do it. Some schools will always employ a qualified teacher, but other schools won't. They've got no qualms about paying peanuts for somebody to go in who's not a trained teacher, and some of them haven't got a degree. They've probably got A-levels or something like that. So
now, I don't think that regional schools commissioners, who are these faceless people, have responsibility for vast swathes of areas across our country, will be able to deliver what the government wants. If we continue to push, we continue to make the arguments, in conjunction, ironically, with Sir Michael Woolshaw, the Chief Inspector in schools, who said our multi-academy trusts are failing our children, failing young people, particularly those from deprived backgrounds, who we represent along with everybody else. We have to make these arguments strongly, loudly and fight back, and we stand together, comrades. Thank you.
As Ian Duncan-Smith has recently resigned over the benefits fiasco, will Nicky Morgan be the next government minister to resign over the chaos that her policy of academisation is clearly causing across Britain's education system? Follow Well-Read Films at YouTube, Vimeo, Facebook and Twitter, or email us at wellreadfilms@gmail.com.
Save our schools! No forced academy! Save our schools! No forced academy! Save our schools! No forced academy! Save our schools! No forced academy!